All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, we all knew that one guy growing up who never seemed to take his life seriously enough. He would always put himself in precarious situations, get caught up in dumb shit, and people would try to tell him that if you don't watch out, you're going to end up in something that you cannot get out of, or you're going to ruin a very good opportunity for yourself. Well, I'm not going to quite cast Jameis Winston into that lot right now, but he's on his way to being that guy. And if he's not careful, he's going to ruin what at one time would have been considered a very fruitful and prosperous NFL career. Hopefully, he'll be able to get himself together. He's caught up in a controversy involving an Uber driver where allegedly he fondled her genitalia while he was drunk. The NFL policy for suspension is 6 games. They gave him 3 games. Why that is, who knows? Maybe because he confessed. Maybe because it was not actually him that fondled the Uber driver. It was someone else. Either way, Jameis Winston seems to be a magnet for stupidity. And that's a facet, that's a component of his life that he's going to have to resolve expeditiously if he wants to maintain his NFL career. So anyway, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
I've made a lot of positive strides since I've been here. So I just got to continue to grow as a man, as a person.
I agree, brother. We all do. Hopefully you put down that bottle, because that alcohol is causing you a lot of problems.
As a leader, as a father, so and I know I can't put myself in situations like that.
Should fans believe then that you didn't do everything wrong that they said you did wrong? I mean, is it fair to trust the process that the NFL did?
Well, they made their decision. And there's nothing I can say beyond that. They made a decision. I have to look at myself and grow and learn from this experience.
Well, supposedly behind the scenes, Jameis Winston is telling anyone who will listen that he did not do what the NFL is claiming that he did not do what the Uber driver is claiming that he did.
Again, this happened 2.5 years ago, since my rookie year, and I've gave my all to this community. I gave my all on the field and off the field.
Well, brother, none of that's going to matter when they decide to jettison you, if they should decide to do so. You know why? Because their mentality is we compensated you with millions of dollars, so you were supposed to be a servant to the community. And you did not do a good enough job in representing the organization because you continuously made bad decisions, which seems to be a trickle-down effect, a carryover from a lot of your exploits in college where you made a series of bad decisions while you were there. That's what they're going to tell you. So once again, many of these athletes, they get drafted by these franchises. They play within these cities and these communities, and they try to engraft themselves into these communities. They spend a lot of hours in charities and fundraisers and foundations, and they help with building projects all across the city. And they think that that's going to build up a level of equity that will stop them from being jettisoned, from being removed, from being cut, from being waived. And that stops none of that. So the main sense of loyalty that you should have is to your family and hopefully to the Most High. And that's what's going to keep you stable. And that's also what's going to stop you from engaging in a lot of fuckery that could cause your life to plummet, to spiral downward.
And I can't let this diminish all the hard work that I've been doing in this community.
There have been fans and media who've written or said that you should be out of town, you should take another snap for the Bucs. What's your reaction to that?
Well, my first reaction to that is I've worked hard since I got into this community to prove that I am the guy that the Buccaneers drafted, and I'm going to continue to do that. I believe these fans should still support us as a whole organization and support me as well.
Well, brother, I'm rooting for you. I hope that everything turns out well. Main thing that you got to do is stay away from the dumb shit, stay away from excessive alcohol, and if you're on weed, get off of that damn weed too, because that's going to impair your decision making. Of course, a lot of the weed head cats are going to jump in the comments and get upset. I don't give a shit. I just hope that Jameis Winston understands that he's going to have to smooth out a lot of things because he has an opportunity that very few people are afforded in this society. He gets to play a kid's game and make millions of dollars. So I would hate to see him become disenfranchised over a few bad decisions.
Because I've given a lot to those fans, and the fans have been very good to me as well.
All right, that was Jameis Winston just moments ago addressing the media for the first time since his suspension. So, guys, we finally heard from him. Did he say the right thing? I'll start with you.
Well,
I think that he said the best thing that he could have possibly stated. And hopefully he keeps most of his responses, most of his commentary in regards to this situation as streamlined as possible. Do not go too much into detail because many of the liberal components of the mainstream media are going to be looking to catch him in his words. This is about the 3rd time that he's been caught allegedly caught in an infraction involving a woman, any type of act of quote-unquote disrespect towards a woman, they are going to scrutinize it to a high degree. They are going to magnify it to a high degree. So he has to be very shrewd in a lot of his decision making. Supposedly, I believe they're saying that he just got married and he just had a child. If I'm wrong about that, one of you brothers can correct me. So hopefully that'll calm the brother down.
Well, I give him points for facing the music. I think that there are a lot of athletes who would not have taken questions on that. But again, it's lip service until we see how he acts. I'm past the point of letting him apologize for stuff and just taking him at his word.
At the end of the day, this will be Jameis Winston's last chance to have a football career in the NFL, especially as a starter. If the Tampa Bay Buccaneers decide to cut him, if he does not perform up to snuff in this up-and-coming NFL season, for the most part, he'll be considered damaged goods, and most likely if another team does pick him up, it will be as a backup. It won't be as a starter.
Because he's got multiple incidents. And let me point this out, guys, if we're getting down to brass tacks. This suspension kills the Bucs. Just kills them. Here's the 3 games he's out for. They open the season at New Orleans. Without Jameis Winston, that's probably a loss. Week 2.
Well, with Jameis Winston, that's probably a loss.
The Eagles come to Tampa.
That'd be another loss.
That's probably another loss. Week 3.
That'd be another loss with Jameis.
The Steelers on Monday night. He can say, I've given my all.
The Steelers game probably could go either way depending on where that game is played. If that game is in Tampa Bay, then maybe Jameis Winston could be the difference if he does not throw too many interceptions. The fact of the matter is that he's going to miss 3 games. When he comes back, depending on what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers record is, he's most likely going to have to go 10-3 in the last 13 games of the season to keep his job.
On the field and off, which is paraphrasing what he said, but if he can't be on the field for those 3 games, all games, by the way, where the Bucs will be underdogs, he's killing his team.
Yeah, and I mean, that division is impossible. There are a lot of good teams in that division. So I agree with you on that sentiment that this team is in trouble for the coming season because, in part, the actions of Jameis Winston.
The main thing that Jameis Winston is going to have to show when he comes back is that he'll be able to establish a better rapport with his wide receivers, that being Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson. Thus far, Jameis Winston has not shown that he has a good enough ability to connect with those receivers. And both of those receivers are big-time wide receivers. So even more than making sure that he can finish the season at 10-3 when he gets back, which I do believe is going to be a benchmark for him, because the Buccaneers are going to expect to win double-digit games this year with him, or most likely they're going to move on. Even more importantly, he's going to have to establish a rapport with those receivers, and his touchdown to interception ratio is going to have to get much, much better. Right now, he's around a 27 touchdown, 19 interception, or 26 touchdown, 18 interception guy. He's going to have to get his touchdown to interception ratio somewhere around 27 touchdowns and 12 or 13 picks.
But I do want to bring up that he said that he's been working hard in the community and on the field to show that he is the player that the Bucs drafted. And I think, unfortunately, he has shown that he is the player that the Bucs drafted.
I agree with you, sir. Unfortunately.
I think his kind of high interception rate is something that was complained about in college. It shows its face on the field.
He certainly had a riverboat gambler factor about him while he was in college. And many of these quarterbacks that have that factor within their quarterback DNA are compared to Brett Favre. Please keep in mind that Brett Favre played 20 years. He only won 1 Super Bowl. And really after the late 90s, he was an up-and-down quarterback who was living off of what he did in the past. That's what Brett Favre was. Brett Favre was one of the most overrated quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of pushback about that. There was about a 3 or 4 year stretch in the 90s where he was unbelievable. But all throughout the 2000s, he was vastly overrated. And I think that a lot of quarterbacks in today's game are living off of the paradigm that he created in the 90s, where you could throw a bunch of picks, but as long as you scrambled around and made a couple of big plays, you were like Kenny Stabler or Brett Favre. You were somebody who was exciting and fun to watch. In today's NFL, you have to be very proficient. The top quarterbacks, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, they're throwing somewhere around 40 touchdowns. Now, Drew Brees does throw a lot of picks. But when we talk about Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, normally they're in the single digits in interceptions.
His off-the-field decision-making is something he was criticized for in college. Again, it shows his face off the field. I think he needs to be proving that he is not the player that they drafted, that he is a better version of that man, and he is growing. And when we heard those...
Well, this year's going to be the referendum on that. There's no doubt about that. And as has already been mentioned, he plays in a very competitive division with the Atlanta Falcons, the Carolina Panthers, the New Orleans Saints, and all three of those quarterbacks. I'm trying to remember if Drew Brees has won an MVP. I know that Cam Newton has won an MVP, and so has Matt Ryan. I can't remember if Drew Brees has won one. I know that he's had a few 5,000-yard passing seasons, so it wouldn't surprise me if he has. So Jameis is going to have to show that his mettle is somewhere up around the upper stratosphere, the upper levels of the NFL, just for his team to be competitive in that division. So he's certainly up against it.
Those comments, I felt Tony bristle again a little bit when he said, "I'm a father," and that is something that I think it's shocking sometimes to think about that. There's no test to become a parent, because there are some things that you can say, and it seems like he may need to focus more on maturing himself than he should be in a position of teaching someone else how.
Well, and he's clearly got.
Well, I think that that's a bit harsh. I'll say this about Jameis Winston. He has a ways to go, but if there actually was a test on becoming a parent, certain people might fail that test that you would not think would fail the test. You might even fail that test on becoming a parent if we're going to go off of parameters or standards based on what will be best for the child.
Really gotten some media coaching, right? Somebody wrote him a very good script. He went back to his talking points multiple times there. And to me, that also speaks to the fact that there's a lack of genuineness when you just repeat the same answer or the same form of an answer over and over again.
Well, here's the problem with the media. When an athlete is in an adverse situation and his responses are controlled and moderated and formulated by a publicist, you say that he's not being genuine. But if he came to the press conference and he was fully genuine and he said, "I didn't do anything to that bitch," you claim that he was being misogynist, you claim he was being chauvinist, you say, why haven't the Tampa Bay Buccaneers prepped Jameis Winston properly? So either way, the media is always going to quibble, especially when there's an athlete or a notable figure who's in their crosshairs.
And I'll return to what I said the last segment. Remorse. I don't get remorse from what he said.
Because once again, I don't think that he believes he truly did what he has been accused of doing.
I don't get an I'm sorry in any way from that particular statement that he read.
Because he is holding this position that he didn't do anything. When they asked him, do you trust the process, essentially, of the NFL, he wouldn't answer that question because he's not willing to admit, despite the fact that it seems like all the evidence seems to point to the fact that he has done it. And one of the things that we normally, as fans and media, we do to cut down women who put out these kind of accusations and say that they are in hunt for attention or they want some money. This particular young lady is most certainly not in the hunt for attention. She has stayed out of all this. She hasn't even gone after a civil suit for Jameis Winston. So I think that I am more prone to believe her. And despite the fact that he continues to kind of skirt around the fact that he's going to take responsibility for this, I think that at some point I would like to see, I don't know that I commend him as much for going to have to answer these questions because he's not answering the questions.
It's highly possible, even highly probable, that the quote-unquote young lady involved feels sorry for Jameis Winston. Maybe she believes that he has a mental issue, that he has a compulsive issue that he cannot control because she seemed to know who he was. So I'm guessing that she's a football fan, and if she is a football fan, then she's highly aware of his history. And oftentimes people will feel sorry for those that they see cannot stop themselves from destroying themselves. Or maybe she's already reached a settlement with him behind closed doors that we don't know about. Either way, the issue, it has to be about Jameis Winston, not about her. At the end of the day, she's going to keep living her life. This season is going to be a referendum on Jameis Winston, whether he apologizes or not. And it's all going to play out on the field.
He's hearing them, right? And then he should help.
And he's going to get them no matter. He's going to get them no matter what, whether it's at a podium or in a locker room or wherever that happens to be.
That narrative
he's going to have to answer those questions.
Nick, you said something earlier that I think we should return to. You know, are the Bucs guilty for spending the number 1 overall pick on a guy who had obvious red flags? He actually, to your point, is exactly the guy he was at Florida State. He was he played 1 year at Florida State, and had 2 or 3 incidents, including one that got him suspended for a big game. Should the Bucs have known better? He was trying to. There's that old saying: when someone shows you who they are, believe it. There were plenty of red flags here. Tampa took them anyway. Are they getting what they deserve?
Well, let me say this before Dominique answers. Please keep in mind that Jameis Winston came out around the same time that Cam Newton was coming off of his MVP caliber season. So at that point, the so-called black quarterback was what was popping. And teams did not want to miss out on potentially acquiring another Cam Newton. And Jameis Winston was a Heisman Trophy winner with the Florida State Seminoles. That is what made him such a hot commodity. Even though everyone knew that he had baggage, it came down to him and Marcus Mariota. Marcus Mariota, I believe, also won the Heisman Trophy, but the consensus on him was that teams were not sure if he was going to be able to play in a pro-style offense. Jameis Winston played in a pro-style offense with the Florida State Seminoles. So that's why they picked him number 1.
So, no, because this new NFL where we expect them to be the moral authority it's relatively new. And the NFL
But Marcus Mariota was sitting there. They
Right,
could have taken him instead.
Yeah, I think it would be hard for anyone it'll be hard to find any NFL insiders who believe that Marcus Mariota was a better on-field talent than Jameis Winston.
Absolutely. And beyond that, let's be quite frank. Has Marcus Mariota had a better NFL career thus far than Jameis Winston? He's made the playoffs, but has he been a better quarterback?
The off-field stuff certainly should have brought up some red flags, but...
And Marcus Mariota's team, the Tennessee Titans, they arguably play in the worst division in the NFL.
But that's never been an issue for, again, if he plays well, none of this matters, sadly, so I'm not sure that I expect the Bucs
I don't know how sad it is. I think that in every industry, basically your value is determined based off of your proficiency at what you do. And people will overlook little foibles or little flaws in your character if you can perform at a high level when you're called upon.
to behave in some moral fashion different.
Right, but we know that we've heard incidents now where teams have hired private investigators to go and try to figure out who somebody really is, what their life is really like, what are they doing in their free time. In this case, it was all laid out there in a public record. You know, a rape investigation, social media posts where he's saying nasty things about women. There was a lot out there.
Well,
why not follow? Why not read the signs?
Okay, maybe if we.
Well, you'd be the same guy sitting on that panel saying, yeah, Jameis Winston had a checkered past, but how come Tampa Bay didn't just roll the dice on him if Jameis Winston had been 3 years in the NFL and had averaged 35 touchdowns and 10 interceptions a year? You'd be that same guy. And if we were to go through the Twitter feed of 90% of these professional athletes, I'm sure that we find some quote-unquote unseemly things that they have to say about women, because for the most part, the type of women that they're going to be encountering are $2 hoes and sluts.
You guys are hoping to change the expectations that we have of all NFL teams, because you can go through the entire list of all general managers, and if they had the number one pick and they had a hole in their roster at quarterback, Jameis Winston was the guy to get that year. And all
But
the
should
teams
he
would
have
drafted-
been? I'm a Raider fan.
Right.
We took Jamarcus Russell with the number one pick in the draft. Huge mistake. I mean, the guy was a knucklehead. It didn't help that he couldn't play. But, you know, he didn't have the mental makeup to last in the NFL. The Chargers used the second overall pick on Ryan Leaf, out of the league in 3 years.
Right, but
I
think
we
you
keep
can
getting these examples and then people ignore them.
I think you can go through the list of several other players who have had off-field concerns and end up panning out pretty well. I think it's probably more of those guys than it is guys who actually turn out to be a problem off the field.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the lens through which the NFL teams and general managers are looking. They believe that these guys are college kids doing dumb things.
Hell, look at Ezekiel Elliott. He has some issues in college. And now by basically every metric, he's at worst the third best running back in the NFL.
Once they get around the team, they'll be able to help them out. And the NFL is a league, frankly, of a lot of second chances. 3-game suspension for what Jameis Winston did is not running him out the league. The Bucs might still be okay in the long term. If they end up next season or season future having a legitimate franchise quarterback, they will look back at this and consider this kind of the growing pains that they had to.
But if you're going to be trouble, you better be real good.
Right.
You ain't 5-11.
That's really all it's about. Once again, Jameis is going to have his best season by far when he does come back from the suspension. In 13 games, he's going to have to go about 9-4, 10-3. He's going to have to throw at least 25 touchdowns, and probably somewhere around 10, 11, or 12 picks for them to even consider moving forward with him. If he comes back in the last 13 games and has one of those 24 touchdown, 19 interception seasons, they're probably going to give him his walking papers.
And that ain't good.
So are the Buccaneers the example of gambling on someone and having that fail, basically?
Well, you said it.
Not yet, because we're not quite sure if Jameis Winston is a failure yet.
You said that there are plenty of examples around the league of kids in college doing stupid stuff that eventually panned out. Is that the exception or the rule? Is that it? Do most teams look the other way on stuff like Jameis did in college?
Unfortunately, yeah. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that you feel the need to ask that question.
I agree. Seems to be very obtuse, this person asking you that question, Dominique. The NFL and the NBA are filled with examples of players who had quote-unquote checkered past, whether it be their upbringing or their conduct, and they showed that once they got into the professional league, that they were able to shine.
I think so often people, not only in college, players that are on their team, you go away for a suspension and you come back, and if you play well, then we're very happy with your
performance. But Laramie Tunzel fell down the draft board because of one 15-second video of him smoking weed in a gas mask. But Jameis Winston didn't fall down the board?
No, I don't think that he slid.
You can't compare an offensive lineman to a quarterback. Quarterbacks change your entire fortune. Once again, just for you to ask that question or make that statement shows that you don't have the ability to place what your opinion is in proper context. Quarterbacks are viewed as arguably the most important position player in all of American team sports. And you can make the case that there's not a close second. If you're able to land a franchise-changing quarterback, you basically can do what you want with the rest of the positions on your team for the next 10 years. The Seattle Seahawks have totally remodeled their defense, and I bet you they still think they can win 10 games because they have Russell Wilson.
Slid because of the video. I think he slid because of the surprise of the video. At that last minute, it's hard to go justify that decision the day after when it's clear that you don't know much about this guy. I think that was about, if that video had leaked a month before, 2 weeks before, even a couple days before,
would have normalized.
The team would have had time to investigate and say, just a guy who smoked weed in college. Yeah. We'll still stand.
By the way, isn't it sad that for Laramie Tunzel, that this is the way we think of him first? I mean,
I have no idea why anybody's surprised. People spend just as much time in college having orgies and smoking bongs and wearing gas masks with weed in them and getting falling down drunk as they do going to class. Once again, the college/university system is just a grove system. It's a Babylonian mystery school system. And you learn the Bacchanalian rites. One of the Bacchanalian rites, or the main components of the Bacchanalian rites, are orgies and wine and revelry.
And because of that, you want to talk about a permanent record. That's part of his permanent record.
Any feature on him will be in the first paragraph.
It's a reality show right there. No, and then Jameis said something like, I work hard on the field. I've done this. It's just on the field. What about the persona? Does that even matter?
Well, apparently the Bucs.
Well, the persona can be altered with a good publicist. And that's the point of hiring a good publicist, so that you know how to market your players. People are going to get into issues, and you have to know how to spin it for the sake of mass appeal.
Are the jury's still out on that question you just brought up, because they've basically scrubbed him from all of their marketing campaigns. They now have realized he can say whatever he wants, but fool me once, and he's fooled us now 3 times.
I am not giving any credit for the Bucs. Like, it feels like we want to credit them for taking him off of their marketing materials.
Well, I just think it's a precursor
to
what might
happen. They knew about this 2 years ago. They kept him on the forefront. There were murals up. There were tickets with his face on them since that point. Like, you can't all of a sudden, they are reacting to the public's reaction. But they are not.
Right, but Dominique, the Philadelphia 76ers, they knew that Allen Iverson had a checkered past when they drafted him. But they said to themselves, this guy could be a franchise-changing player. And for the most part, he was. Not so much in regards to winning, but in regards to public appeal. The Sixers sold out all their home games once they got Iverson.
They're not finding their conscience all of a sudden.
But not crediting themselves for taking him out of their marketing materials. They're being smart.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right, yeah.
I didn't mean to give them points.
Especially anything involving an NFL player and a quote-unquote crime against women, they have to make sure that they go through the proper protocols and the proper channels to protect themselves.
So I think that is a sign of, hey, this guy may not be
We
here.
may not.
in
I don't think so. I think
That's exactly the point. This year is Jameis Winston's biggest year in regards to football that he's ever had and ever will have. If we look back 10 years from now, assuming that this society is still around in 10 years, and Jameis Winston is still on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and he's won a Super Bowl or two, you're going to look back at this moment and say, this is the moment that Jameis Winston saved his own life, saved his own career.
I think this is a sign that they know they would get backlash for doing that. If they thought that their fans would be behind it, they would.
Maybe a sign that Ryan Fitzpatrick has a good 3 first games and winds up.
And let me say something that Dominique knows that.
If I'm Jameis Winston, I'm not worried about Ryan Fitzpatrick. There are certain players in the NFL that we know who and what they are. Ryan Fitzpatrick is a career backup. That's all he is.
That people at home don't think about. Jameis Winston could get a lot of people fired here. There's an entire coaching staff. There's an entire front office staff that if this guy crashes and burns, might get swept out. We see it every.
Well, let's understand something. In the NFL, it's very common for entire coaching staffs to get fired every 3 years or so. The NFL has a huge turnover rate in regards to their coaching staffs because it's very difficult to choose the appropriate roster to win in the NFL. That's why they laud Bill Belichick so much, because he found that transformative quarterback, and basically he could do what he wants with everyone else around Tom Brady.
Every year.
Of players on that team, I talked about earlier how I got traded to the Falcons in my contract year, and Matt Ryan was a rookie quarterback. The fact that he played well allowed me to play well and make money. There are a lot of kids on that team who are players who are going into their contract years who will be hurt by the fact that Jameis Winston is not there to help them.
If I'm Matt Ryan, I'm calling you right now and asking, where's my cut? All right, so that's basically it on that. Hopefully everything works out well for the brother Jameis Winston, and he starts to understand how much more important it is for him to make better decisions and to walk circumspectly. So peace.